The things I saw in Virginia. Where do I begin? I'll start with my first sighting of the weird and unusual, which has endeared the fine state of Virginia to my heart for all time afterward. I may jump from event to event, which spans years in between. This wasn't just one roller coaster ride of the strange. My family, which consisted of my mother, my brother, sister, and myself, moved from Camden, New Jersey back in '91. I was 14 years old then. We had moved into my aunt's home in Falls Church, Virginia, a huge change from the crime and grime-ridden Camden that I was used to. Falls Church was peaceful, quiet at night, and clean. We were surrounded by trees and utter peace. Such a big difference, and I have to tell you that Camden was not without its own sort of oddness. The sun just didn't shine right there, and there was always some sort of deep aggression to the place, as if something was feeding off of the people's despair. This was one of the major driving factors my mother had for wanting us to have a better life, away from crime and peer pressure. Camden just swallows you if you let it. So we bounced. My aunt's home was small but large at the same time, as it was filled with brightness and hope. It was like a cottage, you could say, with a big old backyard and a swing set under a large oak tree. Our yard bordered into the neighbor's yard, divided by a short chain-link fence. And then there was the bamboo foliage, where the first of many of my sightings in Virginia began. The bedroom that my brother and I shared had 2 windows, one of which looked out into the yard, over the fence line, into those bamboos. Now, we had moved in during the summer. Nothing happened then, but when autumn came around, things got colorful. It was just before dawn on a Saturday morning. I'd gotten up to use the restroom at about 4 a.m. The house was dead quiet. I finished my business and headed back to bed. Since the bathroom had its own nightlight, that saved my eyes from having to readjust to the dark. And I think if my eyes had been affected by any more brightness, I probably would have missed out on the festivities in the yard. As I was getting back into bed, I looked out the window and saw what I thought were Christmas lights blowing in the wind. Now, who in the world would turn on their Crimbo lights this early in the fall, swinging there in the wind and not stapled down or anything of the sort? I looked at the trees and the bushes outside, yet none of them were swaying to any sort of breeze. They were all still as a photograph, yet the lights were swirling over the bamboo as if to a tune of music, a song that I could not hear. I quickly woke up my younger brother. He was rather irritated that I rousted him from a beauty rest. He asked me why I did that, and just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, I had him take a look outside without telling him what I saw. I had to know that what it was real. Firstly, my brother rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. Then he began to stare hard. Then he looked at me, and the first thing he said was, "What the heck are those?" "What do you see?" I replied. It's like Christmas lights blowing away." This confirmed that he had seen it too. Those were some rather large Christmas lights. I told him, "But there's no wind. Look at the trees." And sure enough, he and I gawked at the lights as 2 kids at a fully decorated Christmas tree. He asked me what they were, again, and all I could tell him was, maybe they're fairies. These lights were orange, blue, red, pink, and green, even some peach-colored. They were about the size of golf balls, and semi-translucent. They were the most beautiful things I'd ever seen, and there were hundreds of them around. They danced in the air above the bamboo, like it was some sort of welcome to fall party. We stared on in complete amazement. My brother says to me, "Do you hear that?" I focused more, and indeed, there was some music being played. But it was quite faint. Then my stupid self decided to open the window to get a better listen, and the window pane stuck. It did that when the paint would stick to the sides, and you really had to wrench it up. Then, pop, the sound the window made when it finally came loose from the stickiness. It caused the festival of light to come to an end. All those lights froze in place for a moment, as if startled, then flew off in one direction, disappearing and fading away as they went. This was my visual introduction to what I consider the magic of the state. An innocent introduction, because things would escalate from there, or perhaps descend into madness. A few years later, my sister saw tiny Native American Indians messing with our stuff in the closet. Yeah, that sounds bizarre, I know. She had gotten up to use the bathroom, and these little ones spoke English to her. As a basketball they'd been playing with rolled out of the closet, they apologized for their intrusion and promised to set it right again before they left. Sure enough, they did just that, only one shelf lower than it was before. Sometime after that, I was 21 then, my brother and I were on an outing with some friends. I was somewhat of a chaperone. We were in a closed park on a trail. We were looking for a place to sit down, drink a bit, and tell some stories. While traversing the path, my brother and his friends noticed two rather bright lights far back on the trail. They looked like bluish-white light, the sort you might see from a mag light. I thought it was the police, so being the eldest in the group, I would go see to be sure. I walked toward where the lights were seen, all the while thinking to myself, I hope it's not the police. But when I got to the spot where the lights were seen, I was met with darkness and stillness. I felt no ill will or fear, but a strange sense of calmness and peace. And then I saw them, two bluish-white orbs. They looked like the thinnest blown glass spheres, lit from within by living light. Both of them seemed to observe me. One of them flew off, the other stayed and rested on a leaf. The leaf moved as if a weight was on it. The orb began to flicker, and it seemed like it was trying to communicate. I stared at it for a while. The other orb came back eventually, and as if to say to the other one, "Hey, let's go," the two then departed together. A few years after that, crap really started to get personal and disturbing. Having nearly drowned at Virginia Beach and revived on shore, things for me really took a bad turn. It's true what they say about having come close to death. It changes you. And the activity that I witnessed got worse. I swear, when I saw these things, they saw me too. They knew I was watching. One day after an uneventful day at work, I got home feeling run down. My mother was in the kitchen cooking dinner. I said my hello and moseyed on over to my room. I left the door open and I lay on the bed facing the open wide door during the daylight hours. It was then that I felt a strange sensation run up my body, starting at my legs. It was like a tremor of some sort, ending at the top of my head. I couldn't move. My door was only 5 feet from me. It was open, and I couldn't move or yell for help at all. sleep paralysis. But then I could feel a pressure on the bed, as if someone was in there walking on it. Whoever was there rested their weight on my back. I was physically pushed into the bed, and then I felt the hot breath on the back of my neck, breathing, blowing its hot, dry, furnace-heated breath into my ear. It was getting a kick out of the fear I was producing. Then I heard it speak to me. It sounded like a bull had become fluent in human speech.
You are mine. You will serve me.
All I could respond, after gathering myself a bit and freaking out, was, "No, I don't want to. Leave me alone." And with a
"See you again,"
it didn't sound pleased. As soon as I regained movement, I popped out of bed, and I checked my shorts. Clean, thank goodness. I then went to the kitchen to ask my mother if she had heard anything, or if there was anything or anyone else in the house. She said no, said everything had been quiet, and that there was no one in the house other than us. But she did remark on the fact that I had lost color in my face, and she told me to get some rest. I didn't do that. Instead, I stayed in the living room until bedtime, hoping that that was a sleep paralysis hallucination. That wasn't real, was it? 3 days passed. All went well at work and at home. On the night of the 3rd day, I was getting the alarm clock ready for the next day. I sat it on the windowsill, turned out the lights, and rotated my blinds to let only some of the streetlight in to see by if I had to get up in the middle of the night to use the toilet. The moment my head hit the pillow, I felt that tremor begin. Before I could react, someone put their weight onto my back again, pinning me once more to my own bed. I thought it was a break-in. My room was the first one in our hallway. After that, it's my mother's, and I was not about to let someone hurt my family. Adrenaline rushing, I was beyond mad, the kind of anger that superseded fear. I managed to wrench my left arm free, and with it, I pushed myself up to get this attacker off my back. As I got up, I turned to meet my assailant head on, and what I came face to face with was not a man, not a normal man. His face is something I cannot forget. The two of us stared at one another for a while. His skin was stark white, his eyes black and sunken in, like a shark's eyes, and his nose was hooked, a face framed in long, oily, stringy, scraggly hair, with a goatee in similar condition. He stared at me and smirked. I quickly turned away, and with strength I did not know I possessed, I jumped from where I laid to my feet, switching on the lights, like some sort of cartoon cat. The room was clear, though. My heart pounding and I was trembling, I went to check on my mother, but she was fine. But I did not sleep in that room for the next 6 weeks. For the years following that, I saw shadows at the corner of my eyes and constant visitations by spectral, groping hands. My nights would be something I feared for 8 straight years. I got rid of my occult belongings. I found some sort of religion, but that seemed to go to the things that would follow me. Though I did manage to shake them after I got baptized, I used prayer as a defense as well. One of my best friends, who has since passed away back in 2017, may he rest in peace, they had needed some help with some house sitting, and I was the only person he trusted. Though he was Mormon and there was the whole congregation he could have called on, I was the one he chose. Maybe they were all busy, I don't know. He rings me up, and I agree to help him out for a few weeks. Now he's out of town during all this with his family, and he tells me where he hid the extra set of keys outside in the garden. I find them and move in to watch his home till they come back from Jerusalem. I got my airbed with an 18-inch rise, bedding, my art supplies, my radio alarm clock, and of course my EBT card, so I could feed myself while I was there. Things went well and good for the entire run until the final week that I was there. I spent my time there drawing, and if I wasn't doing that, I would be reading. And once bedtime came around, I got ready for bed, taking some melatonin to help with the not being able to sleep thing. In the middle of the night, I felt something in bed with me, something small, so I assumed it was a rat, still plenty freaky enough for me to get up. I began to move my legs to make a sort of snare trap. I wanted to capture it and put it outside. I wasn't going to hurt the little thing. It was going to be a catch and release scenario. When I pulled the covers back to see if I could calm it down, try to let it know I meant no harm, I see that I wasn't snaring a rat. Not even close. It looked like a furry brown tennis ball with beady eyes and teeth, mouth opened up like Pac-Man. I held this thing in my hand. It was fuzzy and warm. You could feel the workings of bone and muscle underneath, but bones like plates under furred skin. It was a little growling ball with teeth. It vibrated and seemed afraid, and I was stupefied into still silence, not knowing what to do. Then that's when I noticed movement in the corner of the room, all 10 inches high of it, a silhouette of some wide-bodied, waddling thing. As it came closer to me, I could see what it was, and to me, it seemed to be a gnome. An honest-to-goodness gnome, decked out in leathers and furs, with a conical hat made of some sort of animal skin. I set the ball of fur on the carpet before it, and it rolled right over to the gnome. Its master, I guess. The little man had a long braided beard, eyes like a deer, and a wide nose. I'm sure he had a mouth under that beard as well, but it was covered. The gnome moved rather confidently over to the side of my bed and used the bedding to climb up to meet me face to face. I was excited, but didn't want to do anything to scare him. I felt I'd already done enough with scaring his poor pet. The gnome was now standing next to my pillow, looking at me like he wanted to punch me. He squinted his eyes and tilted his head, as if thinking, what now? I decided to try to ask his name, try to be friendly. That's when the deepest, loudest sound I'd ever heard came booming. In a voice that should not be able to come from his tiny frame, that gnome bellowed out to me, hitting me like a ton of bricks. You see, the sound apparently was hitting my brain directly, because though his lips were moving, the sound or words he was saying were bypassing my ears. They echoed right inside my mind. When I asked him what his name was and leaned in, the little guy got defensive and yelled out, "Buck." He had a strange accent, and he said it repeatedly, only now I know he was trying to say back. The sound must have been his defensive power. After the 7th utterance of the word, I was out like a light. When I opened my eyes again, it was 7 a.m. To me, it felt as if I just closed my eyes for a split second, and boom, there's the sunshine blaring into my room. Until I met that loud little guy. His little Muppet-like pet, made of teeth and fur, reminded me of that old thing from the Dark Crystal film. Maybe that will help you understand what I was seeing. That's what it reminded me of, anyway. We would move again several times. I moved into my sister's house at a point. Talk about stressful. My sister is a well-meaning person, but she will stress the ever-living crap out of you. This is how I believe those entities track you, via your negative energy. They must pick up on it like bloodhounds. Then we moved again, this time to Middleburg, Virginia. Look it up. It's a gorgeous town. We moved into a rather new building and had the huge finished basement level. I had a big room with a door facing the stairs and another door facing the living area, which had a huge bay window with a view of the forest beyond it. I even had my own bathroom. The room itself was L-shaped. My sister's master bedroom was humongous, and she shared it with her 2 kids. Things were great there, for a while at least. Things got weird at night, though. Did I mention that we shared this house with my sister's best friend? She had the upper levels. Her father lived with us too. The old man fancied himself a shaman of sorts. He spoke of the spirits of the land, how the house had to be blessed and made into a pathway for the spirits to travel through. I thought 2 things of the old man: cool and odd. The old man was not joking around either. Indeed, there were odd goings-on in the house. He opened it all up for whatever to pass through like it was some paranormal superhighway. We saw things in the fields. One time I saw a childlike humanoid on the side of the road trying to thumb a ride. It was dressed in those good plastic bags you get from fancy mall shops. It was the height of a 4-year-old kid. It either had luxurious long blonde hair or it was wearing a wig. Its eyes were huge behind the Coke bottle glasses, and its smile stretched from ear to ear, a large Joker-like grin. Thankfully, that thing was outside, 'cause I probably would have freaked out if it ran up to me, laughing maniacally. Being in the house during the day, when everyone is away at work or school, while I was homesick with thyroid medication withdrawals, it was something I hated. I would walk the dogs, which would never leave my side. They acted like there was something in the house they were afraid of. And I mean they would cower and whine whenever I would leave them by themselves for any period of time. It was like something was following them, stalking them. I would hear movement upstairs from time to time, like children running from room to room, jumping up and down, going from the bed to the floor and repeat, and no one would be home, just me and the dogs. I've heard the laughter of, well, not children, and I hated hearing those sounds. I figured, oh well, at least they're not pissed. I would hate to have vengeful spirits running in the home, and those little bastards would knock on doors during the early minutes of the morning, just as the sun was coming up. I didn't think they were evil. They never really buggered us during the night, just during the daytime hours. Demons don't dig the day, I thought. They'd still screw with you, though, during the day, but not with the same ferocity of their night antics. The things we had running through our house were definitely not human, nor did they actually seem to be demonic, but more fairy folk, playing, frolicking, making merry in the house. Their behavior was never malicious or mean. The dogs feared them, yeah, but the dogs could not understand what they were. The last weeks we were staying in this house, these fae folk really did their best to say hello, or was it goodbye? Whatever it was, they had their own way of doing it. My L-shaped room, as you remember, had the 2 doors at either end. The door leading to the stairs in the hallway, with the bathroom right next to it, and the door that opens to the living room. Down the hall and to the right is my sister's bedroom with the French double-doored entrance. During that night, my room was pitch black, and I had no windows in there. It was super dark. The light from the smoke detector is a green LED, and for some reason on this occasion, it was shining like a darn spotlight. a bright green spotlight shining on a child-sized humanoid. I wasn't alone in my room that night. The color of the light bathing the small form in a green, it made the skin of the thing look green as well. The little person or thing was a well-proportioned small person. Its hair was cut short, and the physique of it was toned and covered in some sort of skin-tight unitard that looked to be made of leaves and lichen. The face, I couldn't tell if this was male or female. The eyes were slanted up at the corners. They were kind, though, and had an expression of curiosity. There was no sign of aggression or malice. I felt at ease and thought I was dreaming at first. But the small little being looked at me, and it smiled, then slipped back into the dark as the green spotlight dimmed and went back to its normal self. I got up and I turned on the lights and checked out the entire room. My doors were locked. That creature just faded away from existence or sight, as if there were no doors or walls at all. After pondering this, I went to the bathroom and checked the hallway, and then I went back to sleep. Only to be awakened at the crack of sunlight. There was enough light now that I could see the room around me, and that's when my night visitor from before came back and kneeled next to me. I turned to face it. It placed one of its small hands on my shoulder and gave me a gentle little pat, like you would pat a scared child or a pet. Perhaps that was its way of telling me that it came in peace. I was still groggy, though, not feeling scared yet. I thought my nephew was in my room trying to wake me up, so when it put its dainty hand on my shoulder, I placed my hand on its knee so I could move it out of the way of the blanket and turn over completely. My hand landed on something cooler, though, cooler than room temperature. It was the temperature of an autumn day, cool and dry. The material I touched was like stitched or woven together leaves and moss, and it asked me a question that I could not understand. I'm not sure it was even in English, and it was spoken different than the speed at which humans spoke. But it sounded like, "Do you have an ally?" as I think back on it. But what actually came out of its mouth was,
"Do you have an ally?"
Still being out of it, I tried to make sense of what it was saying, what was going on, and it repeated this question. When I did not understand it, it gave me another pat on the shoulder, shook its head at me, and went back to the same place it disappeared to during the night. I got up after that, needing to make sure I saw what I saw. I flung open my door and checked the entire floor. Then I knocked on my sister's door. She was livid now because apparently I'd been knocking on her door all night. But I hadn't been doing that. I asked her if her son had been in my room trying to scare me, and she said no, but asked me why I'd been knocking on her door every 5 minutes. I swore to her it wasn't me, but the look on my face convinced her that I indeed was telling her the truth. Her Shih Tzu was growling as well, and her dog never growled at me. There have been many more instances of weirdness, but I no longer feel afraid of them. I understand now that this is all a part of nature, a side of nature that most people wouldn't be used to. We have to respect them and their world, but it seems like humans keep cutting into their sacred places. We've forgotten when we used to walk alongside them. Now we betray them and their nature. We should be mindful of the woodland spaces and those within. We need to relearn to be afraid of what we should fear and to give respect where it's due. I fear that there are lines we've crossed, and the creatures of the forest have their warriors ready to make themselves known, and they have made themselves known. All in all, Virginia is one hell of a special and energized place. Though it's terrifying, I do miss it.